Welcome to the next part of our discussion about Gurdjieff and esotericism with Joseph McKeaney. Tell us more about Earth's lost civilizations.
So we've got a situation where Gurdjieff tells us that what is really important was not the pharaonic dynasties in Egypt, but the civilization that existed before pharaonic Egypt. Gurdjieff repeatedly tells us this. And I think at the time this was lost on his students. They couldn't fathom what he was really getting at. But today, when we have new technologies such as satellite archaeology, where we can see that only 1% of all the structures in Egypt have been unearthed. There are 99% of all structures in Egypt have not been uncovered yet. And it is very likely that we will find in due course that there was a civilization in existence before the pharaohs. And this is what Gurdjieff was talking about, and this is what he stressed so often, that this civilization before pharaonic Egypt was the important civilization. In fact, it's now being discovered by many forward-thinking Egyptologists, people who are not part of orthodox Egyptology, but are on the fringes and who are really at the cutting edge of things at the moment. It's been discovered that the pyramids were never built by the pharaohs. They were appropriated by the pharaohs in most cases as burial chambers and burial tombs for themselves and for their sons and their fellow pharaohs. So we have a situation where if we look deeply into modern-day Egyptology, we will find out that most of modern-day Egyptology is based on supposition, it's based on assumptions, and it's based on also about 5 or 6 different disciplines within Egyptology that don't talk to each other. So we have disciplines in hieroglyphics, we have disciplines in stone dating, and we have disciplines in art, and we have disciplines in measurements of the pyramids, and we have disciplines in ceramics and archaeology. All of these different disciplines do not talk to each other, and this is a major problem. Where else in the world and in academia would we find a situation where all the different disciplines that are essentially all connected to each other, when we talk about the pyramids in Egypt, they don't talk to each other? So this is typical in my mind, in my experience of modern academia. People who should be talking to each other and working together do not talk to each other. So I want to give you, first of all, one recommendation to view on YouTube, which is connected to the pyramids. And it's a YouTube video called The Revelation of the Pyramids. And it's a very important piece of film, and it's a very important documentary, because it shows that a lot of what we have today in academia and Egyptology and anthropology is mere supposition and assumption. And so we have to dig deeper than what we find in colleges and universities. We have to go beyond the norm. We have to go beyond the Rubicon set by these establishments. We must not let establishments determine how far we dig into these subjects and what we find. And what we find is truly startling, because if you take what's happening with Sam Osmanagic in Bosnia, you will find that what he is unearthing and the secrets that he is bringing forth from Bosnia are truly astounding and really, really incredible. Most of the knowledge regarding the pyramids, the powers that be actually have in their possession, but they do not want people to know the true history of the earth. This is another startling discovery if you look into this really deeply. There are factions within governments that do know about this knowledge, but they do not want the population in general to know about this. They want to keep it secret because it means there will be a change, as I mentioned before, of the scientific paradigm. They do not also want you to know that how advanced these civilizations were in ancient times, because, for instance, when we realized that there were civilizations on the earth that knew things that we do not know today, then instantly the gospel, which is taught in colleges and universities up and down the country, Darwinism, has to be put in the trash can. Now, they don't want to put Darwinism in the trash can, and they don't want to put many other principles and textbooks in the trash can, because there are too many people benefiting from this and from this type of teaching in colleges and universities. So at the moment they are doing a very good job of it, at keeping the population ignorant. One must give the devil his due. They have so far managed to contain this knowledge by ignoring it, suppressing it, and also by keeping it out of the mainstream media. Even when things are discovered, very, very interesting and very powerful modalities are unearthed by archaeologists and alternative anthropologists. They are not put in the general media. They are not put on the internet. You will find them in certain corners of the internet, but they're not put on mainstream media. So let's set the record straight. We have many sites around the world where things are happening, but they are not being reported.
What is a higher order of knowledge?
Okay, so that is another really interesting question. So knowledge of man is divided into two sections, really. That is knowledge of the microcosm, which is man, and knowledge of the macrocosm, which is the universe, the cosmos. And in these things, Gurdjieff explains you cannot study the universe without studying man, and you cannot study man without studying the universe. So the study of the microcosm and the macrocosm have to go hand in hand. They must proceed simultaneously. So one of the things we come across when we start to look into this very deeply, Gurdjieff explains to us, is the laws that govern man on this earth. And he elucidates three cardinal laws which are really, really important. And he calls them the law of accident, the law of fate, and the law of will. And these three laws all depend on our level of being, our level of consciousness. That is the level of being that we have attained during our life on this earth. And he explains to us that if we have done no spiritual work whatsoever, we fall under the law of accident, which means that events that happen to us on a daily or weekly basis, although they look like sometimes we have had an input into them, actually, for the most part, they are accidental. They are a combination of forces coming together that are actually not connected to us at all. And Gurdjieff explains that being under the law of accident is not a pretty place to be, because the law of accidents will bring things our way which we don't want to deal with. It will bring suffering, it will bring conflict, it will bring challenges which are difficult. But not only difficult, but those challenges will be repeated throughout our year. And this is where the law of accident becomes a little bit dark, because it's a repetition of these factors continually that tend to wear us down as human beings. So this law of accident is very, very interesting, because most people are not aware of these cosmic laws. The second law, the law of fate, means when we develop somewhat in ourselves, we leave the law of accident behind to a certain degree, and we move under this law of fate. Law of fate means we are living more in our essence. Law of accident means we are living in personality. But the law of fate means we have moved more into essence. We have rendered personality passive, and we are living more in essence. Essence and the law of fate means we are connected to the planets. Personality and the law of accident is connected to the moon and the earth. But when we enter the law of fate, when we start to do spiritual work on ourselves, then we move under the law of the planets, which is a higher law. We come under fewer cosmic laws, which means we are more free. And that which happens in our life is not accidental. There is a force and a power behind it connected with our fate. So the third law, the law of will, is probably the most important of the lot. And the law of will is connected with the sun. So all of these planetary bodies have different vibration and they're under different laws. And we can put ourselves on that level by doing a certain kind of profound spiritual work. And this has been understood in principle by many spiritual disciplines, but has never been really elucidated precisely except by, in my experience, by Gurdjieff. So the law of will means that we have come under the solar law, which is a very high law compared to the law of accident, for instance, which has been under the law of the moon, 96 orders of laws. So the law of fate, we are under 24 orders of laws, and the law of will means we're under 12 orders of laws. So you can see from the moon, 96 orders of laws, moving through to the sun, where you're under only 12 orders of laws, we are under far, far less constraint. And thus, we are much more free than before. So the aim of all spiritual work, according to Gurdjieff, is to move under the law of will. But there is a major caveat with this. We cannot move under the law of will until we have help from a third party who has trodden this path before. And this is the caveat. Usually we cannot get to this level by ourselves. We need help. In order to know about our possibilities on the earth, we must know about cosmic laws that surround us and those that create artificial boundaries for us because of the level of our being.
How practical is higher knowledge?
Higher knowledge touches almost every aspect of our lives, but there are those who do not wish you to access higher knowledge and higher wisdom. The powers that be, for instance, are not interested in allowing you access or giving you an inkling that higher wisdom and higher knowledge exists. And if you talk about this in universities to your professors or to your friends, they might think you're a little bit crazy. But higher knowledge actually has many practical sides, and I'm going to mention some of them. So, for instance, higher knowledge is very important in terms of non-violence. It teaches us non-violence. It teaches us positive communication. It teaches us to have higher aspirations in life, not just to have a nice job, a nice car, a nice place to live, but it teaches us the true meaning of life, to really have very profound aspirations. Also, this higher knowledge teaches us about the divine feminine principle, which is another really important principle that comes to us from esotericism. And the divine feminine principle represents compassion, sensitivity, and awareness of other people. We also have, in connection with this practical knowledge, parahistory. That is the history of our earth before written records. And so esotericism fills the gap. When contemporary academia and history do not have written records, we can resort to studying esotericism, which will fill many gaps in this history. Then we have the paradigm of subtle energies as opposed to explosive energies. So now we are gradually today switching, or hopefully so, from explosive energies like the internal combustion engine and rockets and factories belching out huge amounts of smoke and pollutions. We're hopefully moving in the direction of subtle energies. But here's the interesting point. In ancient times, the ancients used subtle energies exclusively, which meant when subtle energies were used to heal people, there were no secondary effects. There was no damage caused to the human organism. So it is also only from higher knowledge that we gain knowledge of higher states possible for man, higher states of consciousness. We don't get this from any other discipline. You won't find it in modern academia. You won't find it in college. And then we get knowledge of such modalities, very important modalities, such as sacred geometry, sacred dancing, and sacred music, which Gurdjieff brought a lot of this to the West. And he brought the sacred dancing to Europe and to America, giving demonstrations. This is another very important modality that has been lost to modern man. And modern man doesn't even know what sacred dancing is about. Modern man has no idea. And if we study esotericism, we can find what these things actually mean. Then there is the item of medicine, which is really important. It's very, very important, this item of medicine. In modern medicine, we use modalities which are damaging for the human organism. We use substances and we use various chemicals which can damage the human organism and damage the brain, vaccines, etc. But with ancient knowledge, this is totally bypassed. Ancient knowledge does not recommend the use of chemicals or modalities which damage the human organism simultaneously as healing. They seen that in ancient times as a non-starter, as something that was very foolish indeed. Only modalities that heal and do not damage simultaneously were considered in ancient times. So now, with things like the Bosnian pyramids and the Bosnian pyramid tunnels, we are coming to a situation where we're discovering some of these ancient healing modalities, healing with ultrasound, for instance. Sam Osmanagic has found a chamber in the tunnels in the Bosnian pyramids, which actually heals using ultrasound, heals the human body. So esotericism is telling us that we have to go back to these ancient modalities. And in fact, what esotericism is saying is the past is our future. And I'll repeat that. They are saying the past is our future. That means that the knowledge they had in ancient times, in many respects, was far superior to what we have today. But we have to rediscover this, and we have to rediscover how to utilize this ancient knowledge of subtle energies and very fine modalities in healing, medicines, science, etc., etc. We have to use these for man's betterment and for healing on all levels. So then, again, esoteric psychology teaches us about the filters in modern people's psyche. Now, this is a really interesting one because most of us have these filters in place, which means that we only see things which we have been conditioned to see. We do not see things around us in our environment which are different, alternative. They may even be powerful, they may even have veracity, they may even be authentic, but we do not see them. A good example of this is that modern people do not see esotericism. They have no inkling, no understanding, no vision. They do not have any cognitive ability to see the existence, the very existence of esotericism itself. So this is because the filter is implanted, Gurdjieff explains, the filter is implanted by modern education in young people today, prevent people from seeing alternative paradigms, alternative modalities that are possible for us. Then we have another one which is really important we have from esotericism is the three sacred impulses for man. We can learn about the three sacred impulses for man. This is a really important one. So the first impulse for man that we must recognize is self-preservation. The second impulse for all human beings is reproduction or sex. And the third impulse, sacred impulse for us, which is totally forgotten about in modern times, is self-perfection. So this is what esotericism brings us. It brings us a knowledge that has been forgotten in the mists of time, a knowledge that is so valuable, so profound, that when we mention it to modern day people, they have no idea about what we are talking about because of the high level of programming from their education and from their peers and from their parents. So another thing we learn, practical thing we learn from esotericism, is the diminishing of man's cognitive ability. And this I have to mention because this is really, really important. Gurdjieff explains to us that in ancient times, people's cognitive level was higher than what we are today. He said that in ancient Babylon, people understood the very existence of esotericism itself. Esotericism and esoteric principles were discussed openly in the streets of Babylon, whereas today we only talk about football, beer and cricket, or property, antiques or golf or whatever, but we have no idea of ancient wisdom and ancient knowledge and how it can improve our life. So this principle of the diminishing of man's cognitive level is really pivotal for human beings today, to understand that our cognitive level has diminished and that we can actually work to expand our cognitive level by using esoteric materials and esoteric studies. So another thing we learn from esotericism, which is very practical, is looking at integrity. The integrity of human beings, our own personal integrity. Now, we don't get this really from modern education. We don't get this in ordinary society. But true integrity and how we treat other people is incredibly important. And so this subject of integrity seems to have been lost in our contemporary societies, seems to be completely missing. Sometimes we have ethics classes in various colleges and whatnot, but in my experience it's very rare that young people continue with this experience of ethics and integrity. It's usually lost in the morass of pursuing careers, money, jobs, and levels in society. Yeah, another thing that is incredibly important that we get from practical from esotericism is positive communication. How we can communicate in a positive way with our fellow human beings. Even the most simple situation we encounter on the street, we can, if we have the technique, we can communicate in an extremely positive way to everybody we meet. And then we meet with moral force and psychic force. These are two very interesting facets of human nature that are not dealt with in academia or in modern psychology. So we have the issue of moral force, which means the development in a human being of very powerful qualities, positive qualities, like I mentioned before, of sensitivity, tact, courage, awareness, compassion. And with the development of these qualities to a high level in a human being, we see really a new type of human being. We see a man or a woman who instantly demonstrates qualities of the human being as we are meant to demonstrate, as we are meant to have. And these are very important things. Moral force in a human being is incredibly important. And then we have the issue of psychic force, which is like the counterpart force to moral force. And psychic force in a human being represents the ability of a person to see deeply into their environment and to see deeply into their situation as they live on the earth, and also to see deeply into other human beings, what's happening with them, to have empathy, to have spiritual insight and foresight. All these things are also very important. So in esotericism, it teaches us to develop moral force and psychic force. This is a really important facet of esoteric teaching. And all these things are very, very practical and can be used in a very practical way in everyday life. And these are just some examples. There are many more which we can go into at another time.
Where can people get your book?
On Amazon, it's called Creating a Successful Relationship, and it has a subtitle of Hidden Elements Within Relationships. And it can be had on Amazon as a hard copy or soft copy or Kindle. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you for listening. And we hope to talk to you again sometime.
Thank you for listening, and until next time.